My daughter convinced everyone I was the family failure, until I inherited everything and she got nothing. I never thought my own daughter would orchestrate my complete social destruction within our family, but here we are. For 3 years, she systematically convinced every relative that I was irresponsible, unreliable, and completely incapable of managing anything important in life. The family gatherings became torture sessions where I sat in corners while everyone whispered about my supposed failures. She had this way of telling stories that made me sound like a complete disaster, always spinning situations to make herself look like the responsible one dealing with her hopeless mother. My sister stopped calling me for advice about her kids, something she had done for 20 years. My brother started making subtle comments about how I should get my life together. Even my elderly parents began treating me like I needed constant supervision, asking my daughter to handle things they used to trust me with completely. The worst part was watching my daughter bask in all the praise for being so mature and responsible while dealing with such a difficult parent. She convinced them I had spent my savings on frivolous things when I had actually been secretly helping her pay off her student loans. She told everyone I was always late to everything when she was the one who constantly changed plans at the last minute. She made it sound like I was emotionally unstable when I was just going through a rough patch after my divorce. Every story she told had just enough truth mixed with exaggeration to make it believable. The family started excluding me from important decisions about holiday plans, birthday celebrations, and even discussions about my parents' health care. My daughter had positioned herself as the reliable family member who everyone could count on, while I became the cautionary tale they all pitied. She would offer to help coordinate things for me, which only reinforced their belief that I needed constant assistance with basic life tasks. But my grandfather had been watching everything from the shadows, and what he discovered changed everything forever. My grandfather was in his 80s, but still sharp as a tack, and he had been quietly observing the family dynamics for months. He started asking me specific questions about situations my daughter had described to the family, and my answers never matched her versions. He began inviting me over for coffee more often, creating opportunities for genuine conversations where I could tell my side of various stories without feeling judged or scrutinized. He discovered that I had been the one financially supporting several family members during difficult times, while my daughter had been taking credit for orchestrating the help. He learned that I had been caring for our elderly neighbor for 2 years without telling anyone, bringing her groceries and handling her medical appointments. He found out that I had been volunteering at the local community center, teaching literacy classes to adults who were learning to read. My grandfather started his own investigation by calling people I had helped and asking casual questions about recent events. He spoke with my former employer, who confirmed I had left on excellent terms to care for my sick mother-in-law. He contacted my divorce attorney, who explained that I had been the primary caregiver for my ex-husband during his cancer treatment, which contributed to our amicable separation. The truth painted a completely different picture than what my daughter had been spreading throughout the family. My grandfather realized that she had been manipulating situations and conversations to position herself as the family hero, while systematically destroying my reputation. He started documenting inconsistencies in her stories and began setting up situations where her lies would become apparent to other family members. My daughter had no idea that her great-grandfather was building a case against her behavior. She continued her campaign of subtle character assassination, becoming bolder in her criticism of me at family gatherings. She would roll her eyes when I spoke, interrupt me with corrections that were actually lies, and constantly redirect conversations to highlight her own accomplishments while minimizing mine. She started dating someone who revealed her true nature, and the family finally began to see through her facade. My daughter brought her new boyfriend to a family barbecue, and this guy was exactly like her in all the worst ways. He was charming and manipulative, constantly putting down other people while making himself look superior. He started making snide comments about various family members, including some pretty harsh observations about my parents' aging process that made everyone uncomfortable. The boyfriend began criticizing family traditions and suggesting improvements that would give him and my daughter more control over future gatherings. He questioned why certain relatives were even invited, dismissing some of my cousins as boring or unsuccessful. He made inappropriate comments about my sister's weight and my brother's job situation, showing the same pattern of behavior that my daughter had been using against me. My daughter not only failed to defend the family members he was attacking, but she actually joined in and escalated his criticisms. She agreed with his assessment that some relatives were dead weight and suggested they should be excluded from future events. She laughed at his cruel jokes about my parents' memory issues and added her own observations about how frustrating it was to deal with them. The family watched in horror as my daughter revealed her true personality through her interactions with this boyfriend. She was just as mean-spirited and manipulative as he was, maybe even worse because she had been hiding it so well for so long. Her mask finally slipped completely when she started openly complaining about having to spend time with family members she considered beneath her. My cousins started comparing notes about things my daughter had said about different family members behind their backs. They realized she had been playing everyone against each other, telling each person negative things about the others while positioning herself as the trustworthy family member. The boyfriend's presence had somehow given her permission to stop pretending to be the perfect daughter and responsible family member. My grandfather seized this moment to share some of his discoveries about my daughter's lies with key family members. He presented evidence of her financial deceptions, her false stories about my behavior, and documentation of my actual contributions to the family that she had been taking credit for. The family began to see the pattern of manipulation that had been going on for years. The truth about my secret inheritance started to surface, and my daughter's desperation became obvious to everyone. My great-aunt had passed away 6 months earlier, and unknown to the family, she had left me a substantial inheritance that included her house, her vintage car collection, and an investment portfolio worth more than anyone imagined. The lawyers had been working through the complex probate process, and I had kept quiet about the inheritance until everything was finalized and official. My daughter had been particularly cruel to my great-aunt during her final years, constantly complaining about having to visit her and making excuses to avoid spending time with her. She found my great-aunt's stories boring and her house outdated, often making rude comments about the smell and the old-fashioned furniture. She had no idea that my great-aunt had been quietly wealthy from smart investments made decades earlier. I had been the only family member who genuinely enjoyed spending time with my great-aunt, listening to her stories and helping her with everyday tasks without expecting anything in return. I brought her homemade soup when she was sick, helped her organize her photos, and drove her to medical appointments when she could no longer drive safely. My great-aunt had been carefully observing how different family members treated her during her final years. The inheritance included detailed letters explaining her decision to leave everything to me instead of distributing it among multiple family members. She had documented specific instances of kindness and cruelty from various relatives, with particular attention to how my daughter had treated her compared to how I had cared for her. The letters revealed that she had been testing family members to see who truly cared about her as a person. My daughter began showing unusual interest in my great-aunt's former possessions, asking questions about what had happened to her jewelry and wondering if there might be valuable items that needed to be distributed among family members. She started researching the value of vintage cars and asking seemingly casual questions about my great-aunt's financial situation during her lifetime. When rumors about the inheritance started circulating, my daughter's behavior became increasingly desperate and transparent. She began telling new stories about how close she had been to my great-aunt and how she had been planning to spend more time with her before she passed away. She claimed she had been busy with important responsibilities that prevented her from visiting more often, making herself sound like a devoted great-niece who had been unfairly prevented from showing proper care. But the legal reading of the will revealed something that shocked everyone, including me. The family gathered for the formal reading of my great-aunt's will, and the lawyer began by explaining that she had been far wealthier than anyone realized. Her modest lifestyle had hidden the fact that she owned multiple properties, had substantial investments, and possessed valuable collections that had been carefully maintained for decades. The total value of her estate was approaching $2 million, which left everyone stunned. My great-aunt had left detailed instructions about how she wanted her possessions distributed, with specific explanations for each decision. She had been documenting family interactions for years, keeping notes about who visited her, who helped with practical matters, and who seemed genuinely interested in her well-being versus who only appeared during major holidays or family obligations. The lawyer read portions of her letters that described my daughter's behavior during visits, including direct quotes from conversations where she had made dismissive comments about my great-aunt's lifestyle and expressed impatience with her stories about the past. The letters detailed instances where my daughter had been openly rude, checking her phone constantly during visits and making excuses to leave early. My great-aunt had specifically mentioned my daughter's boyfriend in her final letters, describing how inappropriate his behavior had been during the one time she met him. She had been appalled by his lack of respect for elderly people and his obvious focus on evaluating her possessions rather than getting to know her as a person. She had immediately seen through both of their manipulative personalities. The will revealed that I was receiving the house, the car collection, the investment portfolio, and most of the valuable jewelry and artwork. My great-aunt had also left substantial amounts to my parents and smaller amounts to relatives who had shown genuine kindness over the years. My daughter was specifically excluded from the inheritance, with a letter explaining exactly why she had been deemed unworthy of any portion of the estate. The lawyer read the final paragraph of my great-aunt's explanation, which stated that she hoped her decision would help the family understand the difference between genuine care and manipulative behavior. She had been disappointed by my daughter's treatment of both her and me, and she wanted to ensure that kindness and integrity were rewarded rather than selfishness and deception. My daughter's face went through a series of emotions as the reality of her situation became clear. She had spent years positioning herself as the responsible family member while systematically destroying my reputation, only to discover that her behavior had been observed and documented by someone who had the power to make her pay for her cruelty. The inheritance she had probably been counting on was gone forever, given to the person she had worked so hard to discredit. The final confrontation revealed the true extent of her manipulation, and the family's reaction was swift and decisive. My daughter exploded in anger immediately after the will reading, screaming accusations about how I had manipulated my great-aunt and stolen her rightful inheritance. She claimed I had isolated my great-aunt from other family members and poisoned her mind with lies about everyone else. She accused me of being a gold digger who had pretended to care about an elderly woman just to get her money. Her boyfriend joined the attack, making increasingly aggressive statements about how the inheritance should be distributed more fairly among family members. He suggested that my great-aunt had been mentally incompetent when she made her will and that the family should contest it in court. He started making threats about legal action and demanded to see documentation of my great-aunt's mental state during her final months. The family watched in disgust as my daughter revealed the full extent of her entitlement and manipulation. She had never genuinely cared about my great-aunt or anyone else in the family. She had been calculating potential benefits from relationships and positioning herself to maximize her advantages. Her mask had finally come off completely, and everyone could see her true personality. My grandfather stood up and delivered a devastating speech about my daughter's behavior over the past 3 years. He presented evidence of her lies, her manipulation of family relationships, and her systematic campaign to destroy my reputation. He had been documenting everything, and he laid out a timeline of her deception that left no doubt about her true character. My parents were horrified as they realized how thoroughly they had been manipulated by their granddaughter. They began remembering specific conversations and incidents where my daughter had shaped their perception of me through carefully crafted lies and exaggerations. They saw how she had isolated me from family support during difficult times and taken credit for my genuine contributions to the family. My sister and brother apologized profusely for believing my daughter's stories and treating me like I was incompetent. They realized they had been part of her manipulation scheme, unknowingly helping her damage my relationships with other family members. They were angry at themselves for not questioning her version of events or bothering to hear my side of various situations. The family collectively decided that my daughter and her boyfriend were no longer welcome at family gatherings until they could demonstrate genuine remorse and changed behavior. They had finally seen through her manipulation and understood the damage she had caused to family relationships. The inheritance revelation had been the catalyst that exposed years of hidden cruelty and deception. My daughter made one final desperate attempt to turn the family against me, claiming that I had orchestrated the entire situation to get revenge on her for being successful and independent. She accused me of being jealous of her accomplishments and suggested that I had been planning this outcome for years. Her lies had become so outrageous that even she seemed to realize they were no longer believable. The family's response was unanimous and final. They told my daughter that she had destroyed her own relationships through her choices and behavior, not through any scheme of mine. They made it clear that she had lost their trust and respect through her own actions, and that the inheritance was simply the natural consequence of how she had chosen to treat people who loved her. I walked away from that confrontation with my head held high for the first time in years, knowing that the truth had finally come to light and that my family understood who I really was versus who my daughter had convinced them I was. The inheritance was wonderful, but having my family's respect and love restored was worth far more than any amount of money.